It's one of biology's most frustrating paradoxes, and it usually hits you on just a random Tuesday
Yep,
morning.
that completely unannounced.
Right, you're just brushing your hair, maybe catching that really harsh overhead bathroom lighting, and you look down and see this like terrifying amount of hair just sitting there in the sink.
A horrible feeling.
It is, and the part line on your scalp looks a little whiter than it did last year, but then you lean into the mirror and suddenly you notice it. A thick, dark, incredibly coarse hair sprouting right out of your chin.
Yeah, it honestly feels like a fundamental betrayal of your own biology. I mean, your hair seems to be migrating from exactly where you desperately want it to stay
Yes.
to the exact places you are desperately trying to keep smooth.
Exactly. Well, welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are tackling this very specific, double-edged sword that so many women face as they get older. We're answering the question, what causes hair thinning on my scalp and strange new coarse hairs on my chin?
And to figure out the mechanics of this, we've pulled together a really comprehensive stack of clinical sources for our analysis today. We're looking at guidelines from the NHS, the Mayo Clinic, some deep endocrinology papers from Stat Pearls.
Good old stat pearls.
Right. Plus insights from the British Menopause Society and various dermatological clinics.
So our mission today is to completely demystify the biology behind this shift. We want to equip you with the scientific why behind these changes, and more importantly, the evidence-based how to actually treat it. Okay, let's unpack this.
Sounds good.
To understand why your hair feels like it's suddenly packing its bags and moving south, we have to look at the underlying engine of hair growth. And, assuming you already know that hair grows in cycles and sheds, the real focus here is the active growth phase.
Right, the anagen phase.
Yes, anagen.
And that anagen phase is everything. I mean, it dictates the entire architecture of your hair. When a follicle is an anagen, it's furiously dividing cells and building the actual hair shaft.
And it lasts for a really long time, right?
Yeah, for the hair on your head, this active marathon can last anywhere from 2 to 7 years.
Wow.
That extended timeline is actually the only reason human beings can grow hair all the way down their backs.
I always think of hair follicles like these tiny, independent factories peppered all over your body. You've got millions of them.
That's a great way to picture it.
And most of your scalp factories are running on a multi-year day shift, churning out thick, pigmented terminal hair. Meanwhile, the factories on your face are barely operational, just pushing out that invisible microscopic peach fuzz.
Right, the vellus hair.
Right. But if every follicle is its own independent factory, there has to be a corporate management structure telling them what to produce and when to shut down.
Exactly. And the managers dictating those production schedules are your hormones, specifically the interplay between estrogen and a group of male sex hormones called androgen.
Which includes testosterone.
Yes. And to be clear, women naturally produce and fundamentally need androgens for, muscle mass, bone density, libido.
Yeah.
But on your scalp, estrogen acts as an incredible protective shield.
Okay, so it protects the hair.
It basically mandates that the scalp factories stay open. It keeps those follicles in the anagen active growth phase for as long as biologically possible.
Okay, so as long as estrogen is in charge, the scalp factories are well funded, they're running smoothly. But the mechanism that throws a wrench in this whole system is what the clinical sources call the androgen shift.
Right, the shift.
During perimenopause and menopause, your estrogen and progesterone levels take a steep, dramatic dive. The protective management basically leaves the building.
Yeah, they just walk right out.
And your androgens are also declining, but at a much slower rate, so this leaves you in a state of relative androgen dominance.
Exactly. You lose the estrogen shield, and suddenly the androgens have a much stronger relative influence over the cellular signaling in your body. And this is where the specific environment of the scalp becomes a battleground.
Okay, a battleground how?
Yeah. Well, there's an enzyme in your tissues called 5-alpha reductase. Its sole biological purpose is to convert regular circulating testosterone into a supercharged derivative.
Which is dihydrotestosterone, or DHT, right?
You got it, DHT.
Because DHT is the real culprit here. From what I was reading in a review from Biomedicines, DHT has a massively higher affinity for the androgen receptors located in your hair follicles than regular testosterone does. Like, it locks on tight.
Oh, very tight.
And when DHT binds to the follicles on your scalp without that estrogen there to buffer it, it triggers a cascade called follicular miniaturization.
And it is a brutal process for the hair. When DHT binds to the receptor, it actually alters the gene expression within the dermal papilla.
The dermal papilla.
Yeah, those are the specialized cells at the base of the hair follicle that control its growth. the follicle physically begins to shrink. The blood vessels supplying it start to retreat.
They actually call it follicle menopause in the literature, which is such a vivid way to describe it.
It really is.
The follicle is like a mini organ, and DHT basically chokes off its vascular supply. It loses its cellular energy metabolism. Like it just can't produce the ATP it needs to build hair anymore.
Right, and with that energy supply choked off, the anagen phase gets drastically cut short. So instead of growing for 5 years, maybe the hair only grows for 5 months.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and with each successive cycle, the hair shaft it manages to produce becomes finer, shorter, and less pigmented. Eventually, if it's left unchecked, the follicle miniaturizes so much that it just stops producing visible hair entirely.
Now, what's crucial to understand is that the way this miniaturization manifests on a woman's head is very different from classic male pattern baldness.
Very different.
Because men typically get that receding M-shaped hairline and the distinct bald spot on the crown, which clinicians measure using the Norwood-Hamilton scale.
Right, but women present with a very different pattern, which is classified by clinicians using the Ludwig scale.
The Ludwig scale, right?
In female pattern hair loss, or androgenetic alopecia, women almost always maintain their frontal hairline. The miniaturization happens behind that hairline. You see a widening of the central part and a diffuse overall thinning across the crown of the top of the head.
And reading through the dermatological sources, they note how this actually feels for the patient. It's not just looking in the mirror. It's the physical sensation of wrapping a hair tie around your ponytail and realizing you have to pull it through an extra loop.
Yeah, because the mass of your hair is fundamentally decreased.
Exactly. You're losing that density because thick terminal hairs are reverting back to fine, miniaturized hairs.
Which brings us to the ultimate biological irony of the human body, and really the core of the paradox we're exploring today.
The chin hair.
The chin hair. We just walked through how androgens, specifically DHT, act like a wrecking ball on the scalp. They shrink the follicle, choke off the blood supply, shorten the growth phase. Yet those exact same circulating hormones are somehow responsible for thick, coarse, dark hairs suddenly appearing on the chin, the jawline, and the upper lip.
It honestly blows my mind that the exact same chemical circulating in the bloodstream causes two completely opposite extreme reactions just a few inches apart on the body.
It's wild, isn't it?
It's like hiring a new corporate manager who walks into the scalp factory, fires half the workers, and shuts down the assembly line, but then drives down to the chin factory and orders double shifts and heavy machinery.
That's brilliant. And what's fascinating here is the evolutionary embryology behind those specific receptors.
Oh, right. The receptors.
Yeah, the androgen receptors on your scalp and the androgen receptors on your face have completely different genetic programming based on their zip code.
Zip code. I love that.
Right. During human evolution, high androgen levels were intended to trigger male secondary sex characteristics like a beard. So the receptors on the lower face, jawline, and chest are biologically hardwired to interpret DHT as a signal to dramatically upgrade production.
So when that relative androgen dominance kicks in during menopause, those tiny, invisible vellus hairs, the peach fuzz on your chin, they receive the DHT signal, and because of their zip code, they permanently transform. The follicle deepens, the blood supply increases, and it starts churning out a dark, coarse terminal hair. And medically, this condition is known as hirsutism.
Yes, hirsutism. And this highlights a really frustrating reality about it. Once that vellus hair follicle has been reprogrammed by DHT to produce a thick terminal hair, that structural change is essentially permanent.
Wait, permanent even if you fix your hormones?
Yeah, even if you balance your hormones perfectly the very next day, that specific follicle will generally continue producing a terminal hair unless you intervene to physically destroy the follicle or chemically block the growth.
Oh, that is so frustrating. And it's important to point out from the sources that while the menopausal drop in estrogen is a massive universal trigger for this scalp versus chin imbalance, it's absolutely not the only way to arrive at this state.
No, not at all.
Anything that causes an excess of androgens or even just an increased sensitivity to normal androgen levels will kickstart this exact same mechanism.
A prime example of this is polycystic ovary syndrome, or PCOS, which affects up to 10% of women. PCOS is deeply intertwined with metabolic health, specifically insulin resistance.
Right. The insulin connection is huge here. My understanding from the endocrinology papers is that when a woman has insulin resistance, her body is pumping out high levels of insulin just to manage basic blood sugar.
Yep, it's working overtime.
But that excess insulin doesn't just process sugar. It acts like a skeleton key on the ovaries. It binds to the Vesica cells in the ovaries and directly stimulates them to overproduce testosterone.
That is a perfect synthesis of the mechanism. The excess insulin forces the ovaries to churn out androgens, which then circulate, get converted to DHT, shrink the scalp hair, and sprout the facial hair.
So it's all connected.
Totally.
Yeah.
So whether the root cause is the menopausal estrogen crash, PCOS, adrenal dysfunction, or even just a genetic hypersensitivity in your receptors, the mechanical outcome is identical.
Which brings us to the most vital part of this deep dive. We understand the machinery now. We know why the scalp factories are starving and the shin factors are working overtime. So what do the clinical guidelines actually recommend to fix the machinery? Here's where it gets really interesting. Let's talk about taking back control.
Because follicular miniaturization on the scalp is a progressive, physical shrinking of the organ. Passive approaches like, slapping on a biotin shampoo or taking a generic hair vitamin, they simply cannot reverse the mechanism.
You just don't have the power.
Exactly. The clinical consensus overwhelmingly points to topical minoxidil as the first-line, evidence-based treatment.
The sources specifically call out the 5% minoxidil foam. In the UK, it's the only licensed treatment specifically approved for female pattern hair loss. But how is it actually rescuing that choking follicle?
Well, minoxidil functions as a potent vasodilator.
Okay, meaning it opens blood vessels.
Right. At a cellular level, it opens up potassium channels in the smooth muscle of the blood vessels surrounding the hair follicle. By opening those channels, the blood vessels physically widen, which floods the starved mini-organ with oxygen, blood, and nutrients.
Like opening the floodgates.
Exactly. This sudden influx of resources revitalizes the dermal papilla. It artificially re-extends that crucial anagen growth phase, so the follicle has the energy to build a thick hair shaft again.
It basically repairs the supply chain to the factory.
Yes.
But what about the other side of the paradox? If I've got thick terminal hairs popping up on my chin, and we know that structural change is permanent, what is the medical solution there beyond just endless plucking, waxing, or laser removal?
The clinical guidelines highlight a very specific targeted prescription cream for facial hirsutism. It's a fluornithine 11.5% cream, which is often recognized by the brand name Venica.
Venica, right. I saw this in the dermatological protocols. But applying a cream to stop a thick, coarse hair from growing sounds almost too simple. Like, how does a topical cream combat a deeply rooted hormonal signal?
Well, it doesn't fight the hormone. It sabotages the factory's assembly line. A fluornithine acts at the enzymatic level as an irreversible inhibitor of an enzyme called ornithine decarboxylase.
Okay, we need to translate that. What does ornithine decarboxylase actually do for the hair follicle?
To build a thick, coarse hair shaft, the follicle needs to rapidly multiply cells and synthesize keratin proteins. Ornithine decarboxylase is the critical enzyme that produces polyamines.
Polyamines.
Yeah, they're the raw molecular building blocks required for that rapid cell division. It is the machine on the assembly line that provides the physical materials, and if fluornithine binds to that enzyme and permanently disables it.
So even if the DHT is screaming at the chin follicle to build a thick hair, the eflornithine cream cuts off the supply of raw materials. The factory simply cannot comply with the order. So over time, the rate of facial hair growth plummets, and the hairs that do manage to grow become incredibly fine and less visible because they just lack structural integrity.
Precisely. It is highly effective. But there is a major caveat for both of these treatments.
What's the catch?
Both minoxidil for the scalp and eflornithine for the face require continuous lifelong use. You are medically overriding a biological state.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, if you stop applying the minoxidil, the blood vessels shrink back down and the hair loss resumes. If you stop the eflornithine, the enzyme recovers and the facial hair returns to its aggressive growth rate within about 8 weeks.
Okay, I have to push back here.
Go for it.
If we know that for menopausal women, all of this downstream chaos, the DHT dominance, the starting scalp, the sprouting chin, is fundamentally triggered by the fact that estrogen levels dropped and the protective shield vanished, why go through all this topical treatment? Isn't hormone replacement therapy, HRT, the ultimate elegant silver bullet? Why not just replace the estrogen shield systemically and fix both problems at the root?
It is a deeply logical question, and it's one many patients bring to their doctors. But if we connect this to the bigger picture of hormone pharmacology, it is remarkably complex. First, just from a purely regulatory standpoint, HRT is not licensed specifically as a hair loss treatment in the UK or the US.
Right, it's for hot flashes and things.
Exactly. Vasomotor symptoms, cardiovascular health, preventing osteoporosis.
But surely replacing the estrogen helps the hair organically, even if it's not the primary label indication.
It certainly can. I mean, by restoring systemic estrogen, you are theoretically reinstating that protective manager. You're buffering the androgens and helping to re-extend the anagen phase. Many women do report that their overall hair shedding slows down once their HRT protocol is dialed in.
Okay, so it does help.
It does. However, there is a massive, incredibly important trap when it comes to HRT and hair loss that is heavily documented in the British Menopause Society guidelines.
The progestogen trap.
Yes, the progestogen trap. If a woman still has her uterus, she cannot safely take estrogen alone. She must take a progestogen alongside it to keep the uterine lining thin and protect against endometrial cancer.
Right.
But not all progestogens are created equal in the laboratory. Some of the older synthetic progestogens used in commonly prescribed combined HRT medications like norethisterone or levonorgestrel are actually derived directly from testosterone.
Wait, they are derived from testosterone, meaning they are inherently androgenic.
That is the trap. Because of their molecular shape, these synthetic progestogens can bind directly to the exact same androgen receptors in your hair follicles that DHT binds to.
That is wild. You could be experiencing hair loss, finally advocate for yourself to get on HRT, hoping the estrogen will save your hair. And the synthetic progestogen the doctor includes in the prescription is secretly acting like the very DHT you are trying to fight.
Yes.
You would actively be accelerating the follicular miniaturization on your scalp and the hirsutism on your chin while trying to cure it.
Which is why the clinical sources strongly emphasize that if hair changes are a concern for you, you must have a highly specific conversation with your prescribing physician. You have to actively ask for a progestogen that has a neutral or even anti-androgenic profile.
And the sources specifically mention body-identical micronized progesterone, like eutrodestin, or a synthetic option like dydrogesterone.
Yes, micronized progesterone is structurally identical to the hormone your body produces naturally. It has a completely neutral androgenic profile.
Okay, so it's safe.
Exactly. It will do its job of protecting the uterus without hijacking the androgen receptors and counteracting the beneficial effects of the estrogen on your hair. Navigating HRT isn't just about getting the prescription. It requires a nuanced understanding of the receptor profiles of the specific molecules you're putting into your body.
It really highlights how deeply interconnected all of these endocrine systems are. Which brings us to you, the listener. Because experiencing the hair on your head thinning out, feeling that ponytail get smaller, while simultaneously discovering dark, coarse hair on your face, it can feel like a massive blow to your self-image.
It really can.
It can feel like your body is aging rapidly or that you're somehow failing. But the absolute most important takeaway from diving into these clinical sources is that this isn't just getting old. It isn't a personal failing or bad genetics you just have to suffer through.
No, it is a highly documented, deeply understood mechanical shift in your hormonal baseline. Your biological levers have been pulled in a new direction. And because it is a mechanical shift, it has specific, evidence-based medical solutions that address the actual gears of the machine.
So, what does this all mean? It means you don't have to just accept it. You don't have to quietly buy more tweezers and wide headbands and suffer in silence. Armed with the knowledge of how DHT works, of the vascular starvation of follicular miniaturization, of the Ludwig scale, and, crucially, the specific molecular components of your HRT, you can walk into your doctor's office and truly advocate for yourself.
Absolutely.
You can ask for a neutral progestogen, you can ask about the vascular benefits of minoxidil or the enzymatic blocking of eflornithine.
And before we wrap up, there is one final cutting-edge thought drawn from the recent endocrinology research that I really want to leave you with, which completely reframes how we might treat this in the future.
Ooh, what is it?
We've talked extensively about hormones circulating in the blood, but emerging research is increasingly pointing to the gut microbiome as a major hidden player in this entire equation.
The gut microbiome. Wait, how on earth does the bacteria in your digestion affect whether you grow a terminal hair on your chin?
It comes down to something called the estrobolome.
The estrobolome.
Yeah, it's a specific collection of bacteria in your gut microbiome that produces an enzyme responsible for metabolizing and recycling estrogen. When menopause hits, the drop in hormones fundamentally disrupts the diversity of this microbiome.
Oh, wow.
But researchers are finding that certain probiotic strains, specifically lactobacillus and bifidobacterium, can actively help regulate estrogen metabolism in the gut and, crucially, improve systemic insulin sensitivity.
Oh, and since we established earlier that insulin resistance is the skeleton key that forces the ovaries to pump out excess androgens.
Exactly that. By stabilizing blood sugar and optimizing how your body processes the estrogen you do have, a healthy, diverse gut microbiome can prevent the excess androgen production that triggers that facial hair growth and scalp thinning in the first place.
That is incredible.
It means that the future of treating those stubborn chin hairs and rescuing the density of your ponytail might just start with taking meticulous care of the bacteria living in your gut.
That is truly unbelievable. The sheer complexity of how our bodies balance these systems is amazing. So, the next time you find yourself standing at the sink, brushing out hair you desperately wish would stay, and staring into the mirror at a chin hair you desperately wish would leave, remember the factory managers, remember the receptors and their genetic zip codes. The signaling just got a little mixed up. But you have the tools, the science, and now the vocabulary to get your biological assembly lines back in order.
That is a perfect way to frame it.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.